In the 2 books that you have written, I have read of UFO inferences. Would you expand upon those things?
Yes, well, actually, in the first book, the UFO reference is few and far between. I think it's only touched on once. I deliberately suppressed it from the invisible landscape because I thought it was already lit up like a Christmas tree with bizarre ideas, and I would save that particular ornament for its own treatment later. But in the second work, Down to Earth, Psilocybin and the UFOs, I deal with that directly because it seems to me that in psilocybin and the tryptamine hallucinogens generally, we actually have a state of mind that is very similar to the state of mind reported to accompany the UFO contact, and that these things could somehow be co-mapped one onto the other, that at active levels of psilocybin there is visionary ideation of spaceships, alien creatures, alien information, a general futuristic Saussurian kind of quality to the place it conveys you to that seem to be coming from the same place as the modern myth of the UFO, if it is a myth. And we discovered in our exploration to the Amazon in 1971 that this was quite true, that involvement with these tryptamines, as they accumulated in your system, you seem to acquire the ability to inhabit more than one world at once, as though superimposed over reality there was a super reality, a hyperdimensional world where information was accessible in magical ways. And in the wake of that experience, I just went through the literature of the mystical experience and the saucer experience, and ideas like alchemy and that sort of thing, and eventually saw that they were all talking about the same thing, that there is an experience which is gaining ascendancy for modern man, which is called contact with the UFO, but it is not reducible to any of the things that the main people who've written about it have said it could be reduced to. It is not, strictly speaking, a contact from a spacefaring race that has come from the stars. It is not mass hysteria. It is not delusion either. There is, in fact, something very odd going on, something which is as challenging to modern epistemological notions as, a U.S. Air Force jet transport landing on some field outside a village in New Guinea. In other words, here is an area that is close to the experience of people, in that a very large percentage of people claim to have seen flying saucers, an area close to the experience of people where science is totally helpless. It seems as though reality is haunted by a spinning vortex that renders science helpless. And the spinning vortex is the UFO, and it comes and goes on a mass scale, haunting history like a ghost.
You mean the records in the Aztec records, or the whole thing about coming and the white men coming to the New World in spaceships?
Well, all these cases have been made for saucer intervention, but no, actually I'm speaking more specifically of the World War II spinning silver disc in the sky, and the myth that accompanies it of the large pointed-eared, cat-eyed. It has numerous variations, but it's clearly an idea complex emerging in the psyche and the question is, what is it? Is it prophecy? Is it a vision of the human future? What is it? And the postmodern phase of flying saucer speculation is the phase which recognizes that the saucer is somehow mixed up with human psychology, that it is no mere light seen in the sky, that when you go back and question the people who see these things, that right before they saw it, they were thinking something very odd and unusual, which they didn't normally think about, or right after it. And in other words, it seemed to be a kind of ideological catalyst for some purpose. And Vallée, in a book called The Invisible College, was the first person to suggest what I would call the cultural thermostat theory. He said that the flying saucer was an object from the collective unconscious of the human race that appeared basically to break the force of any set of ideas that were gaining dominance in their explanatory power at the expense of their ethical force. In other words, that it was like a confounding which would enter history again and again. When history would build to a certain kind of boil, the confounding would occur.
Mind Parasites does that too.
This is a similar idea, right? And he suggested that perhaps the career of Christ was an earlier confounding, where Roman techne and Roman militarism and all these things was unseated by, a peculiar religion which no educated Roman could take seriously for a moment. I mean, an educated Roman was a Democritean atomist and well-versed in Epicureanism and Sophism, and yet the servants were telling stories about a rabbi who had risen from the dead and had somehow reopened a gate that had been closed since creation, so that the soul of man could again be reunited with God. And this stuff made no sense to the Roman authorities, and yet it quickly overwhelmed the empire. The modern context is very similar to that, in that science now it can be seen to have replaced Roman imperial aspirations as a dominant mythos of control. And it has these neat and tidy explanations of the world, yet persistently from the folk there come stories of lights in the sky and strange beings and bizarre encounters that they cannot quite lay to rest.
And you have experiences yourself.
Oh yes, it's a real, whatever real means. I mean, it is a real experience. It is phenomenologically real. In fact, my contention is that psilocybin induces it, and that perhaps on a mass scale, it's as though there is an event at the end of history of such magnitude that it casts miniature reflections of itself back into time. And these are these apocalyptic concrescences which haunt the historical continuum, igniting religions and various hysterias and seeping ideas into highly tuned nervous systems.
How does it do that?
Well, it's as though it's like Plato said, time is the moving image of eternity. It does it because in its dimension, all these things are somehow co-existent in time or outside of time. They have already happened. History is the formality of viewing this hyperdimensional object in a three-dimensional way by transecting it many, many times until you've built up an entire picture of it. But the mushroom evokes a profound planetary consciousness that shows you that history is just this froth of artifact production that has appeared in the last 10 to 15,000 years, spread across the planet very quickly, but that mind in man just goes back and back into the darkness, you know. And one of the things we were saying in the Invisible Landscape was that there are powers in the human body, or avenues of understanding that have not been followed because of epistemological biases. So that, for instance, the idea that you could use your voice to effect molecular changes in your own nervous system, it sounds on one level preposterous. On the other hand, it's simply a formalized way of noting the fact that sound is energy, that energy can be transduced in a number of ways, and then when you direct it against your body, you obviously do make changes.
Well, that's the typical chanting
that goes on in shamanism worldwide. Well,